as you all are aware, we are experiencing unforeseen disruption in the pharma supply chains due to geopolitical situations and national interests in different parts of the world. I don't need to specify what they are, but we are all aware. This not only affects finished pharma products, but also includes the raw material sourcing, logistics, and transportation. India has the world's largest population. We are also among the world's largest producers of pharma products by volume. We just heard in the earlier sessions that a lot of pressure is being put on India by virtue of tariffs. However, just for my limited knowledge, my understanding is that the US population is only 4 to 5% of the world population. Okay, so I do understand they pay the highest price for medicines, but in terms of population who consume the pharmaceutical products, the US is 4 to 5%, and the majority of the population is in Asia, China, India, and around. Okay. So while every care has been taken to produce world-class quality medicines in India, and that is primarily because of the GMP and regulations, there is still some work to be done when it comes to distribution of temperature-sensitive products. And this being a logistics summit, I think we need to focus on the logistics aspects of the pharma industry. In this session, we plan to discuss demand-supply balancing, supply resilience in light of the global geopolitical scenario, infrastructure and capacity for handling temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals, quality compliance and GDP, which is good distribution practices, both from the service provider's point of view as well as the shipper's point of view. Also, technology and real-time monitoring, and strategies and solutions for collaboration across the various supply chain partners. As you can see, we have a very experienced panel of 7 experts, 3 pharma shippers, 1 from Strides Pharma Science, 1 from Glaxo GSK, 1 from Koye Pharmaceuticals. We have 1 European airport, Frankfurt. We have 2 logistics service providers, Allied Aviation and ESA Logistics. And we have 1 technology solutions expert, Kale Logistics Solutions. So we have a very balanced panel for this balancing act of demand, supply, and patient need. So to kick off our discussions, we have 2 audience polls, and I would very much encourage you to participate, because before you hear what the panelists have to say, it's very important that the panelists also understand what is your opinion. And it doesn't mean that we are the only experts. Experts are also in the audience, and therefore we have 2 audience polls for which we need your participation. And we encourage you to now use your mobile phones and scan the code which will come up on the screen. And therefore, ask the first question is, what would you say are the top 2 reasons for demand-supply gaps? Okay, here we say you choose any 2. One is fluctuating demand. Second is geopolitical issues like conflicts and tariffs. Third is transport route disruptions, both air and sea. And the fourth is lack of capacity in logistics infrastructure. The top one is geopolitical issues, which is conflicts, tariffs. Second one is transport route disruptions, which again, the root cause is geopolitical issues, I guess. And third is fluctuating demand, and lack of capacity is the fourth. Okay? So very nice to get this from our perspective. So when we share our expert opinion, we are able to understand what the audience, not expecting from us, what the audience thinks. And as panelists, we may or may not align with what the audience thinks. I think each person has his own opinion. So this is fine. Can we go to the second opinion poll? How would you rank as the top 3 criteria for global pharma logistics? You have to rank it as 1, 2, and 3 in order of preference. First one is technology and real-time visibility. Second one is lane or route assessment planning. Third is cold chain compliance. Fourth is infrastructure, both domestic and international. Fifth is logistics costs. And sixth is speed to market. I'll give you a couple of more seconds to key in your choices. First, second, and third in that order, because there's a bit of weightage also. Okay, as you can see here, the results is infrastructure, which definitely we are going to discuss in this session. Cold chain compliance, of course, GDP. Technology, real-time visibility. Of course, we have experts here. Actually, I'm very impressed that logistics costs didn't come up on top. Because in most of the conferences, we find people putting costs as the most important factor, but I'm really happy that cost is one of the factors. And of course, speed to market and route assessment has been on the bottom. So with this, I think we will start with our discussions, and I'll open it with the questions to my friend here, Sugeet. When we talk about demand-supply imbalance, can you share the conflicting agendas of various partners that play a role in this?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I am Sugeet Chopra. I represent Strides Pharma. We are a leading supplier of generic medicines into US and other regulated markets, and we boast of a supply chain which is known for very high service levels coupled with very low failure to supply rates. For the right reasons, India is called the pharmacy of the world. Around 30 billion of pharmaceutical exports, 10 billion into a regulated market like United States, 40% of all generic drugs sold into US. So India truly is a global health lifeline. Now, while we talk, at this point in time, there are 250 active drug shortages listed on the FDA website. This is an increase of 35% in the last couple of years. And at the same time, manufacturers are grappling with the issue of excess inventory, choked warehouses. There is an average price erosion to the rate of 8 to 10% annually. And then there is this geopolitical uncertainty, which also came up as the first item in the poll. So all these issues, I mean, we don't have to look at these in isolation, but what these issues reflect is a fine and a very fragile balance between, I would say, 3 A's. That's the availability, affordability, and agility. And to answer the question that Ryan posed, I would like to, of course, structure it into these 3 headers. So starting with availability, I think in the previous panel we discussed the dependence on China. Still, we have very global interconnected supply chains. India imports almost around $3.5 billion of API and bulk drugs. And out of the total exports, 75% of these API and bulk drugs come from China, because China, of course, has a very good price advantage. You talk about fermentation-based APIs, doxycyclines, azithromycins. So there's a definite advantage that China has. Also paracetamols and ibuprofens, which are bought, all of us have bought these drugs. So anything that happens in China has ripple effects in the supply chain. Just 2 years back, there's a Shandong province in China which is known to host a lot of API suppliers. The Chinese government came hard to curb pollution, and suddenly we saw the prices of APIs went for 40 to 50% up. So this, again, over-reliance on China continues to be a pressing concern while we are trying to move away from that, but it will take some time. Second issue that I would like to call out specifically is, just from the perspective of a manufacturer, we always have to be 24/7 in a state of regulatory compliance. Any adverse FDA audit would have very severe repercussions. And one classic example here is the oncology drugs. 2 years back, there was a massive shortage of drugs like carboplatin and cisplatin. These are drugs manufactured using platinum and are usually the first line of therapy to treat certain cancers. Now, because of the price erosion, the supplier base consolidated. There were only 4 manufacturers left. And one of these manufacturers based in India who used to supply 50% was adversely hit with a FDA audit and import alert. Consequence, 700 hospitals in US petitioned to the US government that we don't have any carboplatin, cisplatin supplies. And unfortunately, the loser in this is a critically and a chronically ill patient who needs this chemotherapy. So again, state of compliance is very important for the manufacturing facilities. And again, this causes demand-supply imbalance as well. And it's not only once you have manufactured the product using GMP, you've distributed the product using GDP, that's good distribution practice, but during the life cycle of the product, you also have to ensure that there are no adverse impacts. The major recalls have happened from the market. Products like valsartan, losartan, ranitidine, all of these are blockbuster drugs. But FDA subsequently found that these have certain cancer-generating impurities. So massive recalls were causing, again, a demand-supply imbalance. And as manufacturers, again, you have to always be on top, be aware of what the risk mitigation strategies against these impurities are, and how we are constantly analyzing your product. Next point that I would like to go is affordability. This is where it starts to get a bit tricky because there are different stakeholders in the value chain who have different agendas and conflicting priorities. As a manufacturer, we want to sell the product at the highest cost. That is the wholesaler acquisition cost. But market like US is so, I would say the leverage of 3 big wholesalers is so much that they dictate terms to you. The McKessons and Cardinals of this world, they purchase almost 90% of all the wholesale purchasing that is done. So consequently, they leverage their buying power, and even if the drug listed price is $100, post sales you only realize $70 because $30 is a discount that you need to give. There are also other stakeholders in the chain. They are called, let's say, something like a pharmacy benefit managers. They work very opaquely, not at all transparently. But what these guys do is they are the intermediaries between a pharmaceutical company at one end, insurers at the other end, and pharmacy. So what these guys do is these guys control what products would be under the insurance list. And in order to do that, they charge rebates from the manufacturer. So from a manufacturer's perspective, we've already given some discounts to the wholesaler. Now we also need to give certain rebates to these specific stakeholders, the PBMs, what I said. So consequently, what happens is there is a lot of pressure, there are a lot of conflicting priorities in the chain. And then there's so much competition in the generic industry, right? You might say that from a customer perspective, it's very good, they can get a cheap drug. But yes, if they can get a cheap drug, what is happening because of price erosion is that everyone does the math, and if it's no longer viable, what you do is you tend to rationalize your portfolio, and you exit that market. And that's why, over the years, the supply becomes very, very constrained and consolidated. And the third point that I would like to talk about more is agility. Of course, everyone wants to strive for a responsive supply chain. Because of these margin pressures, it takes cost, right? These are cost investments, capital investments to build additional capacities, to invest in second or third API sources. So this is even further exaggerated by certain crises, the geopolitical crisis that we have, whether it's the Red Sea crisis. Consequently, your containers go via the Cape of Good Hope, and there is 2 to 3 weeks additional lead time in the chain, and you're not carrying that much inventory for that. So again, if you have to air freight, your costs would go up. And last, I would say, is forecasting. Forecasting continues to also be a problem because you always forecast on a historic sales data. Still, we are not using real prescription-based data to forecast. And the problem is there is a throughput time, right? You have to produce the product. It takes 6 weeks if you have the raw materials available. Add another 6 weeks for shipment. So what you're producing right now is trying to serve the demand 3 months down the line, and this could already be obsolete when your product reaches there. So that's why we see these huge swings in regulated markets. So just to conclude on my opening remarks, it's a very fine interplay amongst these factors, right? Again, availability, affordability, and agility, and it's all about finding the right balance amongst various stakeholders in the chain.
Thank you, Sugeet, for your excellent remarks. And I would also like to ask Dr. Pramod, in the light of global disruptions like pandemics, geopolitical conflicts, How can pharma companies build resilient supply chains that balance local production with global sourcing?
Thanks, Ryan. Good afternoon, all. And though I work for GSK, I would like to just state the disclaimer here that these are my personal views and not of the organization which I represent. And thanks for having me on the panel today. And thanks, Ryan, for getting the views of the experts in the audience as well through the interactions which we had at the start. So that was very interesting. For me, Ryan, the agility or resilience of the supply chain is all built around having the dynamic risk assessment across all these emerging risks, which could be, as Sugeet said, it could be regulatory, it could be the impurities which the regulators are looking at, it could be tariff and disruption. So all that put together, we must have a dynamic risk assessment, which is not only internal, but involving all the partners, including the LSPs, logistics, and all the partners in the ecosystem. What is it telling us on a regular basis? Where is the next disruption coming up? So the dynamic risk assessment is very fundamental, involving all of us. Then having that right agility of the supply chain to respond to the upcoming risk and how we already have sort of potential scenarios. We have built the capabilities in the respective geographies, as we say, as we heard from first panel, that people are spreading across the geographies so that we can respond to various opportunities as well as various challenges coming our way. And the third part is building capability and improved collaboration amongst all this. So most of the companies, they're focusing on diversifying the supply base. We heard China plus one, China plus X, plus whatever we are doing. So spreading across multiple geographies for not only your inputs, but also for your customer base, because that is how companies are going to sustain in years to come. So that's very critical. We have seen this during COVID and also during all these challenges which are coming our way. The second is also strengthening our local manufacturing capabilities, inclusive of backward integration. I think on the first panel, this was also discussed. That's fundamental. The Atmanirbhar push, which our government is also giving, it's key for longer term dependence on our own capabilities, where we can sort of isolate ourselves from some of the challenges coming our way. Leveraging the technologies, which is absolutely fundamental. Most end companies are moving from their age-old technologies which they have been using to more AI and blockchain-based technologies. We heard from Vishnu how critical it is for some of the therapies which are coming our way to have that right visibility. So it is not only looking at the information, but also looking at some of the potential disruptions which can come up, the capabilities which are being developed. I'm not an expert, but I think that's very useful to the industry to know what is coming, how do we prepare ourselves for that in coming time. People are also revisiting the strategic inventory, stockpiling, what we should have where. I think you touched upon that. That's absolutely fundamental because you don't know from where the next disruption is going to come. So whatever stocks or just-in-time strategies we had are no longer valid. We need to be very dynamic in terms of what we need to do next. And the last part is the collaboration, building all this knowledge, sharing all our information, being transparent internally, externally with our partners, because that is fundamental, because we all are going to survive together and serve the patients collectively. So those are my views, Ran.
Thanks, Pramod. I want to move to infrastructure, and therefore I'll call on Roland to answer this or lead this discussion, mostly with Santosh. I think if both of you can lead this discussion, it would be nice. So I'll start with Roland first. Another important topic for the pharma supply chain is infrastructure. So can you share what the industry and trade are doing to upgrade infrastructure like capacity enhancement in various areas of the supply chain? So maybe Roland first.
As an airport, we are the infrastructure provider. We are not the handler in most of the cases. So we are active in almost 30 airports around the world, and the biggest being Frankfurt. What we are trying to do, or what we are doing, not just trying, we want to make sure that once the cargo is transiting Frankfurt, either air by air or air by road or road by air in the other direction, that this goes seamless, and that we have the capacity, that our handler have the capacity to satisfy the demand. There was a discussion up there, there was a point up there which said, trade lane disruptions, air and sea. Okay, air disruptions, we know we have those with the Ukraine airspace and the Russian airspace and the Israeli airspace, that region. But overall, the disruptions are minimal on the air side. On the air side, of course, the issue is connectivity. And in the other panel, points were made that shipments have to be fast. Shipments have to be compliant with GDP standards, no temperature excursions on pharmaceuticals. So ideally, of course, it is road to air to road. That is the fastest international or long-haul distribution. What we see in many cases is when it comes to price, all of a sudden speed loses its importance, and companies are willing to ship through various connect points just to save a little bit on the distribution cost. But that is not us to judge. What we want to make sure, and especially for Frankfurt, we decided to grow our capacity by 50% over the next 15 years. So we are in the process of building actually 250,000 square meters of warehouse space in Frankfurt. We're talking to the cargo handlers, we're looking to the ramp handlers to increase their capacity. So we are ready for more. We want to, if the demand goes up, we want to have the capacity there to fulfill this demand. So it's an investment, yes, but we do not know. And you, especially in this region, you have high numbers of smaller shipments. So you are more relying on passenger aircraft, on belly space. So as high as possible, this is what we are trying to get, the passenger frequencies. So we are talking to the airlines that serve the Indian market, being the Lufthansa as our home carriers, being it the Air India and the Indigo on your side. This is the number one priority for us to have capacity available. But it should be seamless and should be high quality, should be fast, and should be reliable. That's the key points.
Thank you, Roland. Santosh, would you like to add something?
Hello. Hi, I'm Santosh Shetty. I'm representing Isha Logistics. So we are primarily into supply chain logistics, wherein we provide international logistics, and we, in Bombay or in Western region, we are largely into assets, wherein we do the road transportation and few warehouses and container freight stations. To add to what Roland has said about the infrastructure, so Indian pharmaceutical supply chain is actually undergoing a significant transformation to cater to the need of the pharmaceutical industry, wherein India is also in the supply chain, logistics guys also moving from the orthodox way of moving pharma products to highly into a technology driven with proper standardization and visibility. Here, the supply chain, cold chain as such, plays a very vital role in the entire supply chain in terms of having the temperature resilient and having product standardization, all those things. Here, I would like to add that India's contribution for the expected sevenfold growth in the coming one decade of pharmaceutical products, India is also playing a very vital role here. In terms of infrastructure augmentation, there are two forces which are constantly at work. One, the public sector of India, which is largely focusing on Gati Shakti terminal, then bulk drug warehouses, which is, highly constantly focusing on developing greenfield multimodal logistics parks, as well as warehouses, across India, while the private sector, private logistics providers are also constantly working on automated warehouses as well as warehouses across tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Also, private logistics providers largely working on providing the fleets with real-time tech-based solutions with visibility of cargo throughout the supply chain. This is one part. Secondly, technology is also, plays a vital role in the complete supply chain, wherein the logistics providers also working on the more standardization and visibility in the entire supply chain, which the entire pharma industry is today looking at, where the pharma industry, while choosing a logistics provider or an infra provider, they do the complete audit to ensure that the supply chain logistics is compliant with the global pharma requirements. While there are challenges, especially in terms of road and road infrastructure in India and port infrastructure, which has several blockages, the complete warehousing industry is looking at shifting the upgradation of the industry in terms of the tier 2 and tier 3 cities are having very poor road infrastructure, which is becoming a big blockages for the timely sensitive pharma supply chains. However, the logistics providers are also working constantly to develop warehouses in tier 2, tier 3 cities to connecting the actual consumption area. This is where the India is, the infrastructure augmentation is happening in India. Thank you.
Thanks, Santosh and Roland, for this. And now we move on to another important aspect, which is compliance. And therefore, this question is to Kritika. There is a lot of discussion on quality, compliance, GDP, especially with respect to temperature-sensitive shipments. So as one of the logistics service providers who are managing the movement of pharma products across the globe, can you throw some light on the care that is taken during movement of pharma products across the globe?
Thank you, Ryan. Good afternoon, all. My name is Kritika Seth. I am the Executive Director at Allied Aviation. How Allied fits into this entire piece is that we essentially are a GSSA, which means that we represent airlines in India, catering to capacity of around 60,000 tons on a yearly basis. Now, this puts a lot of pressure to optimize our capacity. Out of the 60,000, we have seen that our commodities that we transport, 40% of it is pharmaceuticals. Within the pharmaceuticals, we have active and passive pharma. Realizing that India is the pharmacy of the world and also catering to our partner airlines, we then took it a step further and partnered with Enviatainer. Enviatainer, for the audience, is the world's largest container and packaging company for temperature-sensitive goods. Enviatainer has always been globally operating, but never had a leasing station in India. So we joined hands with them and partnered with them for the movement of containers throughout the country. On normal days, I often joke to myself that my job is that of a glorified coolie, transporting a box from point A to point B. But when it comes to pharma, I strongly believe that the human aspect of movement of boxes definitely has an outcome. So keeping this outcome in mind, I don't believe that demand and supply are the only two variables that govern us in the transportation of pharmaceuticals. I believe it is demand, time, temperature, and compliance. When it comes to compliance, I think there has been an evolution undoubtedly from a logistics standpoint. There was the GDP certification, now it has evolved to the CEIV certification. The CEIV certification is an amalgamation of a lot of fragments in the journey that tie up together and give a standardized SLA or a playbook to shippers, manufacturers, airlines, warehouse operators, and all the ones in the chain. So while, how is it that from an air cargo point of view, tying it all up together, I believe our job is manifold, but most essentially is to plan, to protect, and to monitor, most importantly. How we plan, and airlines specifically, we currently are geared up in most of the pockets, the pharma pockets, be it Baddi, be it Gujarat, be it Telangana, be it Calcutta, north, south, east, west. So we are geared up in order to cater to the seasonal capacity that the pharma companies have. We have stations there, we have capacity there, be it scheduled, non-scheduled. Secondly, we lean a lot on data like World ACD, Seabury, in order to route map our pharmaceuticals destinations. So there are a lot of times that we have pharmaceutical companies that would want to send a large active shipment to a remote area. So that is when data comes into the picture, understanding the past trend comes into the picture, and compiling it all together, making sure the SLAs are not moved around. The third part is, of course, the monitoring, which is through data loggers, through Bluetooth, through live data streaming on the containers. There has been a massive evolution in terms of the curiosity and the details in which we have gone. So I look forward to having a more robust conversation, tying in compliance with cost. And I want to go back to something, Sugeet, that you said possibly last year. You had given an example, and I was just looking at some panels that happened last year. You'd given a very interesting example that stuck with me, where there was an excursion that happened of 1 degree, and the cost of non-compliance that was caused to you and your company was way more than the cost of the SLAs that needed to be taken care of. So yeah, thank you.
Excellent contribution, Kritika. Roland, would you like to add something on GDP compliance?
When it comes to and this was also always the discussion we had with IATA and with organizations when it comes to the former, I would say, weak spot in the supply chain. These were the airports. We made sure that this is not happening in Frankfurt and our airports around the world, but because you can see where the shipment is. You have a timestamp when the aircraft is opened, when the ULDs are offloaded, when they hit the ramp, when they hit the warehouse, when they enter the warehouse, when they go into the cool center or into the perishable center, when customs process is completed, when it hits the truck. So basically, at any point in time, you can monitor where your goods are. This is, I think, of essence. And this is an online process. There's a data highway that connects all the stakeholders in the airport. So that is, we want to make sure the quality is high at maximum level. And we appreciate any feedback, anything we forget. This is why we are here, and my colleague Joachim von Winning is also here in the room. So if you have any issues that we need to be aware of, let us know, because this is we are the humble servant here in that supply chain, and we want to make sure that we do that right.
Thanks, Roland. Now we've heard what the logistics service providers and airports do to safeguard the pharma shipments. Now, based on what the partners have shared, I would like to ask Ashu, and maybe Pramod can chip in later, what additional points does the industry need to keep in mind to ensure the integrity of the product is maintained throughout the supply chain?
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ashu from Koye Pharmaceuticals. To answer the question, I would like to divide the answer into 4 parts. So as we all know that maintaining the product integrity is of extreme criticality. And any temperature excursion, if the product goes through, is going to affect the product efficacy, which means that the patient would not get the benefit of the product. So how do we do that? So I think the first part of it is the warehousing. So at the warehouse, do we have a clear-cut list of the products which are meant to be stored as per their temperature parameters? So there should be a list, outside the 228 particular room. Then is there a proper chiller facility for freezing the cold chain packs? These are very basic things, but these are the ones which actually ensure the product integrity throughout its life. At the warehouse, are the people trained to know that, in case of, if there is any temperature excursion, what is the action to be taken? Is there a temperature monitoring continuously? Are there alerts from the temperature excursion of the warehouse to be sent out to the right people? Then we move on to the actual logistics. So that means when we look at the reefer vehicles, so are the reefer containers such that in case the product is of a nature that should not be faced with any kind of contamination? So is the reefer going through any kind of microbial contamination process where it ensures that such products are not going to be contaminated in the reefer? Is the reefer maintaining the temperature? Does it have the temperature controls? Then most important is the temperature monitoring. So today we have IoT-based devices which are continuously monitoring the temperature and also sending out alerts. So we have a courier who has such IoT devices linked with all of his reefer vehicles, and in case of any temperature excursion, apart from showing the temperature to the driver on the dashboard, it sends out alerts to the backend team. So the backend team who has a 24/7 road service, they would get into action and take preventive measures or action on the such kind of excursions. And then most important is having the most trusted logistics partner. So very often, I think as Ryan had mentioned in the very beginning, that thankfully logistics cost was not mentioned as the first and foremost issue. Often, at the organization it happens that when we look at the cost versus the benefit and looking at the pressures that supply chain goes through day upon day, often we look at the logistics cost and we choose partners whom we have not really verified. So when we are looking at temperature sensitive products, it's of very critical nature to identify the trusted logistic partner. So when I say a trusted logistic partner, there are few things that we should look at. One, what is the reefer vehicle that the logistic partner has? So whether it is owned or hired or leased or whatever, are they complying with the GDP practices? Do they have a proper temperature monitoring system? Do they have a tracking device? Do they have alerts? Then what is the support on the road? So if there's a temperature excursion, does this logistic partner have a back-end service to address any such kind of disruptions en route? I think all of these would go a long way. And I think I missed one on the packaging. So today we have a lot of innovations in packaging. There are evident the evident seals which will tell you that there has been some tampering. So tamper-proof seals, or you have boxes which are validated to take the product. If you are sending your goods by air and not by a reefer vehicle, it does happen that sometimes there is offloading by the airlines owing to various reasons. So at such times, there are two things. One is where there's a temperature monitoring. Do you have a data logger in your products? Do you have a temperature monitoring device or the RFID device? Secondly, does the transporter, does he have any option? If there is such offloading, can he take it to the nearest his warehouse? Does he have a replacement of the gel packs? So I think all these factors go a long way in ensuring the temperature integrity in the entire product life cycle. Thank you.
Pramod, anything from your side?
Ryan, I remember our days when we started working on the CTP compliance when we were together in that organization. That is the first time, being a technical person, I started looking at the logistics part and the importance of it. So from my personal perspective, I worked in small, big companies of different sizes, but I think the amount of focus and energy which company spends on developing a product, manufacturing it right of the required quality, ensuring all the compliance, I believe that much of focus is not there on the last part, which is so integral part of this entire supply chain to ensure the integrity of the supply chain, that the product, the patient receives the product. So I think that is evolving. The pharma companies are focusing more and more on understanding the GDP, the regulations which are evolving, the capabilities which are evolving in this entire supply chain, and that's, I think, the way forward.
I'd just like to share 2 cents from my past experience. I remember the truck operators used to dread to come to our plant because before entering the gate, the vehicle, the container, the reefer vehicle would be inspected to such an extent that they should really dread. It has to be washed, cleaned, and only then they would ask them to start the generator outside the gate, the cooling. Okay? Only then they would allow them inside the gate of the plant. So many of the transporters used to dread, but we had a very good relationship with them and the logistics service providers, because end of the day, if you're looking at it from a shipper point of view, irrespective of whichever country you're shipping to, it's our responsibility, right, to provide quality medicines right up to it reaches the patient. So I just want to share that from a shipper's point of view, and Pramod said it rightly. There's a lot of investment in research, in development, in production, and control within the plant. And once it goes out, we do understand there are different environmental conditions, okay, because in our plants it's all controlled. So it's more important and more difficult for the logistics community to ensure the integrity of the product. So with this, I think we've heard almost everybody except one gentleman sitting in the last. I have not forgotten about you, but I kept you for last because after seeing all this, the technology person or the technology makes everybody on a common platform. And therefore, I'd request Nitin, in this age, we cannot survive without technology and real-time monitoring across the globe. I think you also heard some comments from Ashu and the rest on technology. Can you share some thoughts on how latest technology trends can support compliant pharma shipments?
First of all, I'll say that we as an organization, we build the application only for the logistics industry, and I can proudly say that 85% of India's overall shipment, air cargo, moves on Avasa platform. So you beat any airport in India, take Mumbai, Bangalore, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Delhi, all uses our applications. And we ensure that because once the cargo comes to the airport, the complete operations, the automation, the visibility, and I think the most important aspect is that we have reduced the number of document exchange, which any shipper or forwarder can have an idea that what all number of pieces of the documents you need to exchange, which has been drastically come down, and we have brought it to a minimum level and smoothened the entire operation. Now, overall, the airport operation has been smoothened out, but there are 2 more factors which needs to understand. First, the cargo which moves by all the entities, be it the freight forwarders or the airlines, the visibility of a shipment, which is the most important, and I think the importers and exporters are always keen to know where my shipment is all about. And we as a service provider offer this visibility to them that once the cargo leaves your factory, till it reaches to your importer's factory or a warehouse, what is the movement is happening. And obviously, this comes with the help of the airlines, the airports, the forwarder, the transporter. But when you accumulate or you combine all this thing, it gives them a clear visibility, helps them out to identify where the shipment is all about, whether there's been delayed, what actions needs to be done, what other activity needs to be aligned. That's the part one. Now, apart from the visibility, I think the most important aspect, I think in this panel discussion and earlier, there are a lot of compliance needs to be met. Any manufacturer or the exporters know that they have to build or they have to meet all the compliance requirement of each country. Now, even if I take the India case, we have a customs, we have a DGFT, we have RBIs, and a lot more entities are involved. So the exporter or importer also needs applications or a functionality which can smoothen this entire operation. Because to coordinate with the multiple stakeholders, like if they have to deal with the forwarder or the transporters or the airlines and with those entities, it's not easy for them. Now, when you look at the amount of data and the hard copies they have to exchange again, it's a humongous task for them. So we also have a platform which available to the importer exporter to smoothen their entire operation. Typically, we have seen that manufacturer focus more on a manufacturing side. They have automated the process, they have plannings and other thing. But when it comes to the compliance and the logistics, it's been left open. And there you find that the team is working with coordination with their partners. And it goes in a manner where a lot of confusion happens. So to smoothen this whole part, and obviously the freight forwarders, the transporter airlines, plays a key role. To smoothen this whole thing, and when you have one platform, with the clear visibility, I think we will able to achieve whatever growth we are expecting, with whatever constraints we have on infrastructure side. But I think the important aspect is that how the visibility is going to help them. And I think the key point is a clear visibility to all the stakeholders, not only the importer and exporter.
Thanks. You have a point?
Yeah, I just had one point. All of us sitting in this room have a common goal, right? To ensure that the right product in right quantity, at the right quality, and at the right time reaches the customer. Now, what we are seeing is, at least from a manufacturer, is that more and more regulatory agencies are going into temperature excursion topics. So during an audit, we actually faced, this was not true maybe 5-7 years back, but now more and more in every audit from a regulatory agency, they ask you for temperature excursions and what corrective and preventive action are you taking to mitigate for those. And on many occasions, even certain adverse observations are also given if you cannot demonstrate that you have the integrity or you're not acting against the constant excursions you're getting on a particular route. Now, the challenge comes is that we all agree that compliance is very important. That is something that we will not compromise on, right? Because at the end, it's a patient who's the customer. But where we would also, from a manufacturer perspective, seek support from the industries, it's still very expensive, right? To use an aerotainer, $10,000 is the rental cost for days, right? Active versus passive, there is a 5x cost difference. Generic drugs cannot afford those margins. Yes, you have maybe certain specialty drugs, maybe you have that leverage. But in generics, the margins are very thin, as I explained. So if you continue to incur these very high 10 costs, you really have to take certain strategic decisions that whether you want to continue on this product or not. So here, we would also like to seek support from LSPs to how innovation is done so that cost also comes down, right? So in tandem, while compliance continues to be at the forefront, but it's also driven in a cost-effective way.
So thanks. So I wanted to ask one more question to Nitin.
Sure.
And you spoke about the entire tracking of the entire product. I just wanted to understand, you also track the temperature, or is it only time and location?
Primarily, it is a time and location.
No, I didn't want to put you on the spot. I just want to know for people who would like to know. Okay.
So, yes, Ashu, temperature is also an element to that information. Obviously, we as an application, we depend a lot on an airport and an airline to update us back. So yes, those elements are available, but again, at what stage, it may not be the same, because the information what is available at airport and aircraft but may not be available when the cargo is on the move.
I don't want to speak on, okay, Ashu wants to speak.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on that, I think with the availability of AI, there are so many options to have a real-time monitoring and tracking of the product. And it is very critical. I think just a month or so back, one of a big pharma company was moving in major expensive consignment in a reefer, which had crores of rupees worth of weight loss drug. I think that's the most in thing. And en route, at some point, the vehicle was broken into and a few shippers costing about 2.5 crore were stolen from the reefer. Now, if there was a real-time monitoring device which is used by some of the freight the logistics partners, there would have been an alert which would have gone to the partner's back-end office. But in this case, there was no such alert and this theft happened and the company reported it to CDSCO and the government because of the high value of the goods. Now finally the goods have been recovered, but this just emphasizes the importance of having a real-time monitoring and tracking. So more and more LSPs have to look at this, that they have to get the reefers fitted with such devices.
Go ahead, Kritika.
I'd like to tackle 2 points here. One is, I think this point really goes back to the adaptation of technology, right? The technology is out there. The real-time tracking is there. Data loggers are there. There are multiple airlines that are month on month coming up with new technology. But I really think it's the adaptation and the timing of the technology that is a miss here. I would like, that's would be my response for you. And then going back to Sugeet would be, when it comes to costs, right, from an airline point of view, again, it has to be very, very collaborative. If you were not in pharma and retail, I would possibly tell you that your inefficiency is my productivity. But because you're in pharma, I have to make sure that from an airline point of view, your seasonality and my capacity is available, and that has to go hand in hand. How do we make sure that we contain the costs and give you that balance of if a product is active or if a product is passive, how does it still work in your P&L? Collaboration. For starters, I really believe that when there is a multi-party conversation with manufacturers, freight forwarders, airlines, and I'm talking only from the air point of view. Ocean is not my forte. So from an airline point of view, if all the stakeholders sit together, if I have to discuss with you that this product that is currently going in a container, can this be moved into a smaller box? Can the packaging be changed? Can the pallet optimization be better? That would help in the cost for starters. Second would be the destination. If the destination is A, but near to the A destination, there is a cheaper option of B, can the movement go there? So I think that the key and what I'm trying to bring out here is cost is directly related to collaboration. And that is the only way that we tackle the tariffs, we tackle the trade diversions, we tackle capacity, and then we also adhere to compliance in the midst of all of this.
Excellent. You just took me straight into my next question, which was on what strategies can be implemented to enhance collaboration across supply chain stakeholders. I don't know whether Sugeet or Pramod would like to take this one.
I think this is elaborated by some of our technology partners, but I think for me, the collaboration also is tech-enabled these days, because earlier, I think most of the people had their own visibility in the silos, whereas now we are looking at digital platforms which are shared. So we could potentially have end-to-end visibility, and yes, it is also the pharmaceutical company's responsibility to adopt, experiment, learn, and feedback to the ecosystem, how these are all working. So I think integrated digital platform is one of the enabler. Collaborative demand, forecast and planning, we are looking at that as our theme. So I think it's not only internal inputs which are responsible these days, but it is not only commercial function, but having the entire ecosystem contributing to demand forecasting will help fostering the collaboration. Also, I think one more important element in this is collaboration with the regulators, So a lot of our stuff, clearances are dependent on the import-export clearances, and when it is NPI, it is on a critical path. So having that right alignment, collaboration with the regulators is key. We have seen in the pandemic, but that should be our way of life, and therefore the entire ecosystem collaboration is really fundamental and which is certainly evolving these days.
So Roland, I remember you said that you made a statement that you are a servant of the industry. No, you are a partner of the industry. Okay, with this, I think we conclude our discussion, and I would open it up to the audience for any questions, if there are.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. My name is John Barreto, and I'm from Cargo Management Solutions, an independent consultancy based in Dubai. And prior to this, I served 30 years with an airline. It's quite an interesting panel and a good discussion. My question to Kritika is probably, we have IATA GDP and IATA CIV and GDP certification, while both serve individual preferences. Is there a specific preference over certification? That's my question number one. Question number two is, what do you see that is required for certain underserved airports? For example, I just was recently in Congo, and there's absolutely no infrastructure there. I was in Syria some weeks back, and these are emerging airports where there will be a lot of influx of pharma going forward. So how do you see, what is your views about these type of airports, where they stand, and what should they do to basically upscale themselves to come up and help the pharmaceutical products, the product vertical of the airline? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So to answer your first question about CEIV, so what I believe IATA in collaboration with CEIV is doing is that they are independent, independent evaluators for excellence in certifying pharmaceutical throughout the journey. Like GDP currently is a very fragmented not sector, but a fragmented certification where an airline gets it, an infrastructure gets it, a service provider gets it, right? What happens with CEIV is that it kind of amalgamates all of them together, whereas the journey becomes a CEIV certified. So when we have airlines that are CEIV certified, their hubs, their transit points, their infrastructure, their people throughout the journey are CEIV certified. So this is taking a lot of steam. Also, I think it's extremely difficult to be CEIV certified right now. There are airlines that get CEIV certified in the first go, but when they have to be refreshed, their infrastructure and the entire SLAs have to be maintained at the highest compliance. So that is, I hope I've answered that part of it. Second, in terms of infrastructure, I feel the glue to all of this is innovation and packaging. By innovation, I mean, so while we are great at sending our shipment to the destination, the last mile is the challenge. And I think a lot of us kind of were exposed to that in COVID. So packaging, so while, for instance, I know companies that were packaging their products in bigger containers, there have now become extremely innovative packagings, right? So with those innovative packagings, you then tag along with ideas like the drones. So when you collaborate both of that together, so like with drones, there is a per weight restriction of around 3 kgs, for instance. There are manufacturing companies that are packaging according to that restriction so that the last mile is not, there's no concerns there. So I feel the only way we can go forward in these remote areas where the pharmaceutical demand is extremely high is packaging and innovation combined together. I'd like anyone else also to please add in their thoughts here.
I would like to thank my fellow panelists for being very brief, concise, and keeping with the time. Okay, thank you very much.